Welcome back, everybody, to the Double Dip Draft Season 4 Week 1 Division 2 recap. I am your host today, Spood, coach of the Southtown Sandslashers. Joining me today is...
IDM4, coach of the Brussels Espions.
And today we're going to be breaking down all 4 of the matches that happened Week 1 in Division 2 of Double Dip Draft Season 4. We have 4 exciting matches. We're going to be taking it from the top with Remedy, the coach of the Kansas City Krabbys, versus Aurora, coach of the Hoensbroek Haunters. And after that, we're going to be taking a look at Spootman, coach of the Heerlen Hawluchas, versus Jason, the coach of the Hartford Honchkrows. After that, we're going to be taking a look at Skittles, the coach of the Nevada Ninetales, versus White Loaf, the coach of the Loafville Lanturns. And then lastly, we'll be taking a look at Spood, coach of the Southtown Sandslashers, versus Cabral, coach of the Slinging Aegislashers. Wow, I cannot believe I remembered that. I want to quickly also, just before we get into the analysis, let you know that I'm aware that I am on Division 2. We try, ideally, to kind of split it up so that there's not a conflict of interest or a bias in approaching a certain division's matches, but Division 1 came up a bit short on people who were willing to do this for this week, so I'm here instead with my good pal IDM4, top seed of the tournament, commonly considered the best Pokemon brain on Earth by everybody. I'm pretty sure.
Maybe not, but I'll take the compliment.
You're the best Pokemon player in Belgium, maybe. Maybe. I don't know how the competition is in Belgium, but I assume it's pretty stiff, or maybe not that stiff. Hey, why don't you take the lead and let us know about Remedy versus Aurora?
So, on Remedy versus Aurora, when we actually watch the team preview, we can immediately notice that Remedy is heavily struggling against Zygarde Dog. Zygarde Dog having literally no resistance to 1,000 arrows.
Yep.
And when you actually watch on her draft, you can see that Remedy has Appleton, her only grass type, but it's also Dragon type. So even though it could resist the 1,000 arrows, it could not really tank well. Probably not well in Outrage.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, locking into an Outrage is kind of a decent thing, because even if you can force that, you've still got Mimikyu in the back. And
it's true.
An important aspect to this match that I think went a little underappreciated by Remedy was Mimikyu's ability to kind of just naturally stuff a sweep because of its disguise. That was especially important against Pheromosa, who, I mean, it's even advantageous to something like a substitute, because Pheromosa could potentially, like, Quiver Dance Bug Buzz around the substitute, but
it's true.
Mimikyu Disguise is guaranteed to take a hit from Pheromosa, and also it does have that nice fighting immunity, which means it could potentially, albeit a bit risky, it could potentially, like, switch in on a Pheromosa attack if she was expecting a fighting type move. But the Mimikyu went a little underappreciated. The problem was that Remedy hard switched in the Mimikyu on 1,000 arrows, and then right after that took a Future Sight for like half damage.
Yeah, and we could also talk about Heracross, who is the only other resistance to 1,000 arrows in Remedy's team. Mm-hmm. I guess I can understand why she actually didn't bring Heracross. When you watch Aurora's team, you have Archeops, you have Crobat, you have Rotom-Fan, you have Victini, you have Slowbro, all those Pokemon who actually are pretty strong against Heracross. So even though Heracross would have been really good against Porygon 2 and Zarude, I guess she didn't really want to take the risk to just have some kind of death fodder in her team, just for the eventuality that Aurora would bring those few Pokemon that would be weak to the Heracross stabs.
Yeah, for me, the philosophy from Remedy's end should have been like, okay, how do I prevent the Pheromosa sweep? How do I take out her defensive core in Slowbro and Porygon 2? Functionally is what she brought as her like defensive core here. Excuse me. Wow, that threw me off. Sorry, I got the COVID. So basically, I'm a little, I understand, like, looking at team preview, like, Archeops is something that you can't sweep on, because I'm gonna try that again. Cut all that out. You can't sleep on Archeops because of its insane attack stat and fairly usable speed stat. Of course, Defeatist gimps it really hard, but you know, you can still apply it in the same way that you would apply, like, I don't know, Galissapod or something that also has like an under 50% ability. Like, you can still get a lot of mileage from that top level of HP. You can even run like a Pinch Berry if you wanted to ensure that maybe you can get one more turn, assuming that you didn't instantly die to a move that would bring you below half. And I don't know. I think that Archeops was really, really scary here. And it actually does come in clutch. Turn 1. I talked to both of these people, and they told me that the Xurkitree was scarfed, and so was the Archeops.
Yeah, and if you actually don't know that, you actually think that Remedy literally just let Xurkitree die, but she actually had a pretty good plan by leading with it. Just Volt Switch on it, just in case it will actually switch switch out, and if she actually landed that Volt Switch and the Adiakios wasn't scarf, that would have been a big threat out of the way, and she would have gained quite a big momentum actually.
Yeah.
After that, I mean, it's true that Zydog, I would literally call it, could have come onto Xurkitree pretty freely, even though Xurkitree actually can learn Dazzling Gleam, so it's still a weakness that Xurkitree can exploit. But apart from that, I'm pretty sure Pheromosa would have been slower than Xurkitree. Slowbro doesn't really want to take on it. The only thing that really wants to take an electric attack from Xurkitree besides Zydog is actually Porygon 2.
Yeah, and Porygon 2, we'll touch on Porygon 2 a little bit more in a few minutes, but it's just one of those things where you look at the team preview and like Remedy has the right idea with, actually I would say Remedy's team is insanely well constructed in my opinion, but there's just like the edging out case where Aurora identifies that Scarf Xurkitree could be a threat, so she counters it from team preview under the assumption that if it's a thing that threatens her team, you need to be prepared for it. And I love the Archeops Scarf lead counters Xurkitree, and you just know that you're going to be able to kill it. I mean, maybe Remedy could have run like a Sash on Xurkitree. That would have been kind of weird. But it would have guaranteed a turn at the beginning. But I don't know. I don't know how expected Scarf Archeops necessarily would have been as a component of the team. Like, I don't know necessarily that I would have expected that if I were team building from Remedy's perspective. So I totally understand running the Scarf. Plus, the Scarf does get you more mileage into a late game scenario, which it's good and bad because she led with it. I think if maybe she kept Xurkitree in the back to be sort of a late game Scarf cleanup mon, it could have benefited more. But that's kind of like a hindsight is 2020 thing, right? I think that as a lead or as an end game sweeper, it could have been good.
Maybe a better lead in a way could actually have been Zapdos Galar, because Zapdos Galar is still pretty fast, can actually learn U-turn, which is proven Remedy actually used it. And besides Pheromosa, I'm pretty sure nothing. Okay, maybe Zydog. Maybe Zydog can actually outspeed the Zapdos Galar, but even if it cannot speed, Zydog doesn't really want to stay on the Zapdos because it doesn't really do much. Even though it has 1,000 arrows, it still needs one turn to actually ground it. And even if it's grounded, it's still not doing too much damage because it's not super effective. And I'm pretty sure that the Zapdos, even on the Galarian form, is pretty defensive.
Yeah, that sounds about right. The archetype, if you're not familiar, for regular like Kanto Zapdos, it's a bulky immunity like to ground. It's flying electric. It has static. It's very defensive. So it takes hits really well. Zapdos Galar is a bit more offensive, and its typing is different. So now it is flying fighting instead of flying electric. Which is why it actually stands a better chance against Zydog, which can use 1,000 Arrows, its signature move, to essentially it's a ground type move that can hit flying types and levitators, which is insane. Like as a move, it's probably the most spammable move in the game, I think, just because it's got no immunities and very few resists. And you can just see like Zydog comes in at the end of the game and just literally can keep clicking that button. But you even see Aurora switches it out, like turn 13, wins Aptus Galers in front of it at like 70 because she knows that she can't kill it in one shot.
And we actually have to notice as well that Remedy's team is heavily weak to the ground type. Just look at the key tree, you can do Toxtricity, Heatran, just 2 double weakness to ground type and 1 weakness for Pokemon who is not really bulky. Earthquake literally tears apart this team.
Yeah. And it's like, that's, it's important to have resist on top of immunities, and it's, I don't know, it's unfortunate that I think Remedy was a bit stuck bringing a team that's weak to ground, because that's just kind of how the draft ended up playing out.
Indeed.
But I still like looking at it. It seems to me like it was very doable, especially because like I think with a better played like Mimikyu Disguise for the late game Pheromosa, or I don't know, just some kind of playing around. Like you could abuse Swift Swim, like maybe Draco Meteor. I don't know if it was running that on Kingdra to get around the Zygarde. But there were definitely options on Remedy's team. I think that Remedy's team had a lot of cool stuff. Something notable that I wanted to show off on the analysis was the Heatran, which was running a Power Herb Solar Beam, which my understanding is that is not necessarily the most uncommon set, but in Gen 8, I very rarely see that. It's kind of reminiscent of like Gen 7's Z moves. You would see people run Grassium Z for Bloom Doom on Heatran to get similar like one-turn grass nuke coverage to cover its like checks.
And I can guess it's actually a pretty good answer to the Slowbro that could maybe take 1 Solar Beam and then die from something like a Nurse Power or another attack. But then again, the Heatran is basically walled by the Porygon 2, because as we mentioned a bit earlier, that Porygon 2 is actually running Trace. And Trace on this team is very, very good. If you actually see the Heatran, so Trace copies the Flash Fire, so Porygon 2 basically gains the immunity to the fire moves. It copies Punk Rock from the Toxtricity, which literally makes the Sun moves weaker on it.
Yeah.
And you could also mention the Kingdra Swift Swim. Even though Porygon 2 doesn't really benefit much from it, I think it can still get, even at min speed, a little bit faster than the Toxtricity, which could give it a slight advantage if it were to actually try to kill with a tri-attack, but that's negligible compared to the 2 other abilities.
Yeah, Trace, the mileage is insane, and it's kind of one of those things where it's a bit of niche Pokemon knowledge that you kind of need to be able to apply in draft, where I think that a lot of people wouldn't know this about Punk Rock. I didn't know this about Punk Rock. I knew that Punk Rock boosted sound-based moves when you used them. I didn't know that it reduced the power of sound-based moves when used against you, which means that Porygon 2 coming in and tracing that Punk Rock, I mean, that's crazy. It just basically neuters that Pokemon. Even in the event where you're running, I don't know, like Drain Punch, Shift Gear for like covering the Porygon 2, I don't even think that that's a 1v1 that Toxtricity wins. I think it just gets out damaged or potentially statused.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, even though I did know about the Punk Rock stuff actually reducing the Sun moves getting hit by it, but in the middle of the match, I wouldn't actually think about that. I wouldn't actually think about, hey, that Porygon 2 would trace my Punk Rock, so the Sun move would actually be weaker against it. In the middle of the match like this, even beforehand, I wouldn't think, oh, that's a threat, because Trace is a big threat in a way. I would maybe think about it for Heatran, but for Toxtricity, it's so unexpected because it's such a niche effect for abilities. Even if you know about it, it's not something you expected.
Yeah. It's like seeing the interactions. If you watched the Division 1 recap, that's going to go up before this one, There's a similar, like, very kind of niche interaction where Coma-O Bulletproof is essentially makes it immune to Spectrier Sweep, because Spectrier doesn't have, like, good alternative moves to use. And you kind of see that reflected here too, where it's like, unless you're 5 layers deep into the Pokemon Showdown lore, then it's hard to know the exact effects of, like, Punk Rock functionally in your match versus a Trace Porygon 2. You just have to know so much about so many interactions of the game that it's, I don't know, it's not very intuitive.
So
I think that's about it though, right? I think we've pretty much covered.
yeah, I mean, we talked about the fact that the hard switching into Mimikyu was a questionable move.
Yeah, that definitely, that was, I think, the fatal mistake, was just hard switching Mimikyu in on the 1,000 Arrows. I think you have to kind of play it safe. I understand the rationale of, like, okay, well, maybe Zygarde's going to drop, like, an Outrage or some kind of dragon move that my Fairy can switch an immune to, but it's a lot more important that you retain that disguise for later, so that, again, you can prevent, like, the end game where Pheromosa is just sweeping through your team, because Mimikyu can absolutely kill it in one shot, as long as it lives one.
Yeah, and especially in Generation 8, since Disguise actually has been nerfed, compared to Gen 7, know that you actually lose 16th of your health, I believe, when the Disguise gets busted.
Yeah.
And you can no longer run Mimikyu Focus Sash to actually lift 2 hits instead of just 1.
Yeah, that's something that I used to do in draft as well. I drafted Mimikyu in 2 different seasons of the Double Dip draft, and it's a great Pokemon. And not being able to run Sash kind of hurts a bit, but I mean, it's still, the disguise is the really big draw for me. And I think you'll commonly find that, like, functionally Mimikyu benefits more from, like, a Lumberry or something anyway, but yeah, just losing that option to be able to soak 2 hits is unfortunate.
Yes. So I think we can actually go to our second match for Spoopman versus Jason.
Yep, this is Heerlen Hawluchas versus the Hartford Honchkrows. This was, I think, one of the matches that I was most excited to watch in week 1. Jason he's not, like, the old guard, right? But, oh no, my phone is ringing. Let me go take care of that. Sorry, Cabral. I know I complained so much about editing the other video, and now I'm fucking this one up so bad. Okay,
take it back to you're very excited about this match.
Yep. So I was really excited. I think that this was one of the matches that I was really... Fuck, I fucked that up. Hold on, let me try it again. This was actually one of the matches that I was most excited to watch for week 1. Jason kind of... He doesn't necessarily represent the old guard of Double Dip Draft, but he's been playing since Season 2, which is longer than I think most people. We had most of our new players come from Season 3. But Spoopman, he's basically brand new. He played in Season 3. He did remarkably well. He made it to playoffs in his first season, which I don't think anybody has done, aside from him. I think that playoffs last season looked very much like an SSL playoffs, it was mostly the old guard. But I think it's this kind of like Jason versus Vincent is kind of, and Vincent being Spoopman, of course, the Heerlen Hawluchas. This was a match that I was excited to watch because I wasn't sure how to call it, based on teams and also based on just, like, experience in the game. I felt like this was an opportunity for Spoopman to, like, really prove, like, hey, actually, I'm gonna take down Jason just so you know that I'm consistent, I'm here, I'm ready to make playoffs again. Whereas I think Jason has a lot to prove by being like, okay, well, I may not have made playoffs yet, but I can take down a guy who's been there. So I felt like just for the storyline aspect of it, this was a big match for me, and I also felt like, again, I wasn't sure how to call it. I wasn't sure who the better player was. Unfortunately, I still don't know who the better player was, because this was not a superb display of skill from either player, in my opinion.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, there's some kind of pseudo rivalry between the two of them when we actually just see them at the messages in the Discord. So that was also another reason that I was quite excited for this match, because I was like, okay, they're basically shit-talking each other a lot right now, so let's see who actually can hold the ground and beat the other one.
Yeah, definitely. So I love Jason. He brings a lot of spice to the league, and Jason being Red Sack, the Hartford Honchkrows, he is a smack talker. He really runs his mouth, and I think he's got a lot to prove just because he puts himself in that situation. And he starts this game off kind of rough. Spoopman is also making some questionable plays, but we'll kind of come back to that. If you just watch this, it's kind of a slobber knocker. I mean, Spoopman puts the hurt on like 3 of his Pokemon before he finally gets a kill, and his Moxie almost just immediately snowballs. And it's really, really hard for Jason to find some ground here. But like as soon as it gets an opportunity to just start moving, it starts going. And then turn 12 is an absolutely tragic turn because Spoopman, the Heerlen Hawluchas, they drop a Rock Slide, 90% accurate rock move, and it misses the Frostmoth, which would have certainly killed it. And in response, Jason lands a Blizzard, which I think is 70 accuracy?
It's 70.
70 accuracy. That's a Focus Blast, essentially, in terms of accuracy. And he just hits it raw and just immediately kills it back.
No hail required.
Yeah, no hail required. He actually, I gotta say, Jason, I love, it's a bold choice. I don't think anyone else would. I think everybody would have pretty much just thrown an Ice Beam on there and said, well, you know what, I'm missing like 15 points of damage, right? Like, whatever. That crazy to me that he's just running raw Blizzard, and even crazier that he hits like 4 in a row. I mean, he just keeps dropping the Blizzards. If the Frostmoth had been hit by the Rock Slide, that was a guaranteed Moxie sweep. There was nothing that he could have done that would have outsped or lived a hit.
Especially since it's guaranteed that the Frostmoth was a heavy duty boot because it didn't take the
sticky web,
the reduced speed from the sticky webs. So it's not like it was a sash or something. It would definitely died.
Yeah, it would have absolutely died. And the issue is, upon like going back and checking the counts, or even just kind of applying your head to it, Crocodile had moves that were 100% accurate that certainly at +3 would have killed a Pokemon as frail as Frostmoth. That Spoopman just didn't click them. And Frostmoth, I mean, it gets so much off of that. The one Quiver Dance, and then just, again, it drops just pop, 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 so much. He forces the Hawlucha to pop its Unburden, but even at that point, like, it's unable to take out Slowking without boosting, and Slowking just comes in and kills it back. And at that point, basically, Spoopman is just toast.
Yeah, I just want to come back to the preview when you actually see that Spoopman leads with Arachonid, and you actually watch Jason's team. Just realize that it doesn't have any switch in to Arachonid.
No.
Liquidation is literally resisted by none of these Pokemon. And if he actually had Leech Life instead of whatever the other move he actually had, I'm pretty sure he could have recovered from the Umbreon pretty easily.
Yeah. I honestly, when I was first watching this replay, I was thinking to myself, like, oh, I guess Arachonid's like banded or something. Like, it didn't look like it was doing banded damage, but just the way he clicked Liquidation, like, over and over and over and over again. But then when you go back and look at it, you're like, wait, no, he set up Sticky Web and then started hitting Liquidation. Like, he wasn't banded. I don't know. I guess he may have been, like, sashed or something. I don't know if his item ever got revealed. But it was a weird set, and just the opening interaction is so strange, because he could have gotten, like you said, a ton of mileage out of Leech Life, and he just like didn't end up running it, or at least he didn't end up using it.
I am checking if it was actually likely because it used Reflect. So next turn. Just in the meantime, I just also want to mention that running Earthquake when you set up your own grassy terrain is not the best idea.
Yeah, that's another one of those, like, again, and there's a lot of these that you have to consider in draft, so if you're like a newer player and you're sitting here listening to this, like, how the hell am I supposed to remember all this? Another random thing you've got to remember about grassy terrain is that it specifically gimps the power of Earthquake, the move. Does it reduce it by half? Is that what it does?
By half, as well as magnitude. Those are the two moves that get reduced by grassy terrain.
I did not know that it did magnitude. See, there's stuff that we don't know. But it's not like a universal ground type move nerf. It's only to those two moves. So what a lot of people will do in response is they'll run something like high horsepower if they get access to it, which is 5 less power, 5 less accuracy. but it only hits a single target if you're in like a doubles or a free-for-all situation, and it's specifically not affected by grassy terrain, so it is just objectively more powerful, twice as strong, just about, in grassy terrain. Whereas you see that, and we did check, Pilot Swine does get
Access
high
to
horsepower.
yeah.
Yep. So running Earthquake was not ideal from a team building perspective. And this is week 1, so if you've been out of practice and you're just like coming back in and trying to get back into the swing of things, it can be hard, especially if you don't play in grassy terrain a lot, which, I don't know, maybe you don't. Maybe you haven't been playing OU. Maybe you're not a fan of Rillaboom. If you haven't been playing in grassy terrain, you might not know about the effects it has on Earthquake. But you can see it actually does matter. That Urshifu takes like 37 from an Earthquake in the grassy terrain. Whereas a high horsepower would have certainly been a 2-hit KO. It now becomes a 3-hit KO, maybe even a 4 after like leftovers and grassy terrain recovery.
And just to come back to the last mention, I checked, the Araquanid was not likely. The reflect actually expired after 5 turns.
Yeah, I am assuming it was Sash, I think. That's kind of the only thing I can think, because it wasn't, it wasn't choiced, it wasn't light clay, it wasn't like leftovers, so I feel like it kind of has to be Sash. Or maybe like,
unless
it's not Pitchberry, right?
I don't think so, unless it was something like a Mystic Water, just to even increase more the power of liquidation, which is already increased by the ability Water Bubble, which is crazy.
Yeah, Rakuen is such a good Pokemon. I think a huge sleeper pick for like whatever tier it is, like a tier 3.
I believe so, yeah.
Rakuen is a great Pokemon. Yeah, I don't know. I think this was kind of a sloppy showing on both ends. It's interesting to see Jason kind of back up the big talk in the Discord with some action, winning his week 1, but to do it on what was essentially the combination of bad RNG and also bad plays from Spootman's part, I don't know, it's kind of bittersweet. I'd like to see Spootman bounce back and get some strong, like, very, dominant-looking wins. To kind of assert again, like, no, playoffs was not a fluke last season. I'm here to take it all this time. Whereas I think with Jason, it's kind of like, hey, prove that this was just like an off game, and prove that you can win without the RNG, swinging into your favor. I think that's, for me, that's my interpretation of the storyline going forward for these guys.
The last thing I actually want to mention before we actually go on to our next match is the fact that at some point we had a face-off of Umbreon and Crocodile. Umbreon had actually used Wish and was literally waiting for the move to heal it, but for some reason Jason decided not to use Protect. And in a way, I can understand the reasoning. Maybe expecting Spoopman to actually go for Stealth Rock by predicting the Protect. But in this kind of scenario, when your Umbreon is pretty low, and you usually know that Crocodile is a fairly strong Pokemon, even if it wasn't running a fighting type move like Close Combat or Superpower, you don't want to get killed by Earthquake. So in that case, you should run Protect, even if you technically end up actually getting hurt for it because you get predicted because of a setup move like Bulk Up, or maybe in Crocodile's case, once again, Stealth Rock. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because afterwards you might still have something to get back into the groove. You could switch, for instance, your Moltres. I guess in that case it would have been a good idea, since Spoopman had Rock Slide on his Crocodile. But you could still have something like your Urshifu, decent. I guess it could. Maybe if it was set up or something, it wouldn't have been able to take an Earthquake. But I don't think Crocodile actually gets any setup move, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. To me, it reads as like an opportunity to firstly like scout for close combat, which is something that Crocodile does generally. Like, you have to be aware that it has it in the back. It's kind of like Mudsdale or whatever in that case, where it's like, it does just get really hard hitting coverage moves for stuff like that. So you kind of just have to be aware, like, okay, if I'm Umbreon, I haven't protected last turn, I'm in versus this Crocodile. even if you do, like you said, even if you're risking like a setup turn or a rocks or whatever, I think that protecting is like 10 out of 10 times you're getting your leftovers recovery back, and you can scout for a move that might force you out. I
Yeah.
think that to just raw dog it and click whatever button he clicked there, I don't know, maybe foul play or whatever.
Yes, so early in the match, I think you should always play the safest way possible, because once again, you have to scout your opponent's move. You actually have to be sure what they're running, and making risky plays is fine, but you shouldn't make them too early in the match, because if it just doesn't pay off, you're actually getting really hurt over it, and afterwards you can't actually recover from the risky plays. So play safe at the beginning of the match, and if you see an opportunity that would really help you out, then you can actually play risky. And that's an advice I could basically give to all of the players of the draft league, and even to new players of Pokemon in general. Trying to predict is fine, but usually playing the safest is always the better.
Yeah, definitely, because Pokemon's a game of resource management. It's managing your PP, it's managing your switch-ins, it's managing your health, of course. And when you're considering like the end game goal is to whittle a team down to a point where you can sweep them, or just literally removing defensive options so that they lose Pokemon over time, it's you do need to value consistency to a degree that is kind of hard to understand if you haven't been put in a position like this where you're like, oh my god, my Umbreon's in versus this Crocodile. Am I going to click Protect, or am I going to make the crazy read? Like, when I was new to Pokemon, that was a thing I struggled with a lot, and I still am not great at it, is like identifying opportunities to like make a read and actually hit something and maximize a turn. But it's all about like micro interactions. I'm speaking very vaguely because it's hard to like put it better than you did. I'm kind of just echoing your point. If I was going to add anything, it's kind of like from my background in like Super Smash Brothers and like sort of fighting game adjacent communities. There's a concept called conditioning, and it's obviously not from fighting games, but it's applied to fighting games, and it's applied to Pokemon to an extent as well, where if you don't get a chance to know your opponent's habits, then you can't really accurately respond to them. So throwing out a prediction in the early game in that scenario specifically is kind of just a shot in the dark. Like, and I hope that they jump into something that gets hit by what I'm about to click, as opposed to like an informed, like, oh, I know that they tend to want to switch into this, or I know the mentality that they have exhibited from what they keep their Pokemon in on. It's hard in Pokemon because the cards are not all laid out on the table. Like, you don't know necessarily what item or moves or EV spreads or whatever are going to be run on a given Pokemon, so you can't necessarily always do that. But that even just, if anything, makes scouting more important, because it's all about conditioning. It's about knowledge. You got to gain information. I don't know. I feel like I'm saying words and they're not coming out the right way. But
no, man, I understand what you mean, and it's even truer on the first week of a draft league, because when it's the first week, and I'm just going to go back on my match against Phantom Knight on the other division. Personally, I had no idea who Phantom Knight was really, if he was a beginner, if he was a pretty veteran player. So when I faced him, I had no idea what his playstyle was. What should I do against him? Maybe should I play pretty safe, or should I play a bit more aggressive, just in case if I play too safe, maybe he will initiate some kind of setup. I don't know. I had no clue. And once again, it's literally the week one, so people have drafted the Pokemon. They probably have some kind of strategy in their mind, because they drafted those Pokemon, so they want to do something. And you try to think, yeah, what do they want to do with those Pokemon? Maybe they will do that, maybe they will do that. But since it's the week one, you don't have the information of the previous matches like you might have on week 2 and week 3 or week 4. And you kind of threw a shot in the dark right now. I remember previous season when I was facing Chemist in season 1, in week 1. I was really scared because Chemist is a very good player, and he was like, "Oh my god, what do I do against him? I have no clue what he will do." It's literally the same that I was doing at Phantom Knight. Should I play safe or should I play aggressive? Once again, I would advise to play safe, but when you know your opponent and you know they can be tricky if you play too safe, that would not necessarily be a good thing. So it's always. I will agree that this match we could be biased in the fact that it's true that they didn't really play well. But once again, it's week one, so week
Right.
one is always the weakest week for everybody.
Yeah, it's all about like shaking off the rust and getting back into the swing of things. You can't expect everybody to come out the gate swinging 100%. And I think actually it's interesting that you mentioned that. Just one more thing before we clear on to the next match, because I know we're kind of harping on this a bit, but it's interesting that you talk about the dynamic of playing safe versus playing aggressive, because I tend to find that playing aggressive is more rewarding if you're playing against somebody who is playing safe. Like if somebody's making consistent switches, then that means aggressive plays are more optimal. But then obviously the same swings back into the other direction, where if you're noticing your opponent is always making like crazy plays, then you just adjust for it, and you're kind of, you're also making plays at that point, but it's more about like adapting to the kind of momentum that they throw at you. So it's not that there is necessarily one safe option that's always the right move, but it kind of changes and shifts as the battle continues. It's a battle of wits. It's a chess game, it's your mind against my mind, and we're just on the battlefield and we're moving our pieces, and it's just all about counterplay to counterplay to counterplay to play. So I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic, and it's a lot to chew on. It's a very sort of philosophical approach to like the strategy and meta.
Sure.
Anyway, enough waxing lyrical about stuff that people probably don't understand because we're not saying it right. Moving on, Game 3 in Division 2 for Week 1 of Season 4. I'm good with. I got all the numbers right. Is going to be Skittles the Butt, the coach of the Nevada Ninetales, versus White Loaf, the coach of the Loafville Lanturns. This is a match that actually is an upset. Definitely by rank. Skittles has shown a lot more competence in the last season or two than he did in the past. He's not necessarily on the same meteoric rise that Firebolt's had, but Skittles is getting more and more consistent every single season, and this is a great example of there used to be at a point in the draft league you could kind of look at the player list and think okay, that's a gimme, not, I hate to name names, I'm sorry for bullying you here, but, if you were in a division with GTP Woody in, SSL Season 2, you would think to yourself, okay, that's kind of a buy, right? I can kind of take that and know that, he's not trying that hard, he doesn't know that much about the game. Double Dip Draft Season 4 is a new frontier. You are no longer allowed to sleep on any competitor. You can lose to anyone. You can and will lose to anyone. And White Loaf, one of the absolute old guard, definitely a decorated Pokemon player. He's won, big tournaments under big names back in Pokemon Smowdown days. White Loaf is a threat and a half, and he dropped his Week 1 to Skittles.
Yeah, it's true, and it's even more of an upset when you realize that White Loaf actually has Zygarde, and it's kind of the same situation that in the previous match Remedy against Aurora.
Mm-hmm.
Zygarde is a threat in itself, for the single reason of 1,000 arrows. There's a reason why Zygarde has actually been banned in Ubers.
Yeah, it was OU at the time of us putting together the tier list and drafting, but it has since been banned to Ubers. Alongside Pheromosa, I think?
I think Pheromosa is still never used.
Oh, you think? Okay. There was something else that definitely got banned to Ubers, but I don't remember what it was. And I don't know. These are crazy Pokemon. The difference between Zygarde, the dog form, and Zygarde, the snake dragging thing, is basically... I don't know how it works in Generation 8. In Gen 7, it was to do with the amount of Zygarde cores you would collect.
Yeah, basically we have Zygarde 50% and Zygarde 10%. And the big difference between those two is that Zygarde 50% is actually fairly bulky, while Zygarde 10% Zydog is actually fairly fast.
Mm-hmm. But they both get 1,000 arrows, which is, again,
like
I said before, the spammiest move, or at least the most consistent kind of spammy move, I think, in the game, just because of the way that it removes its own immunity and just runs train. I mean, what resists ground besides grass?
Grass and bug.
Bug.
Those are the only two that resist
Yeah,
ground.
famed excellent defensive types, Grass and Bug,
Exactly.
are the only resist to ground. Like, it's crazy the amount of work that thing can do. And just, this is another like example of a game where Zygarde could have definitely put in a lot of work. There were a few over predictions from White Loaf in this game that kind of cost him, especially kind of into the end game. He was still kind of keeping it competitive, but there were, again, just like a few questionable assumptions that swing more into like the hyper aggressive or like over predictive category, whereas I think a safer, like scouting approach would have been better. And I think there's no better illustration of that than when you jump to Zygarde, and I'll actually get there on my replay so I can show you. Zygarde is in versus Suicune, and it's been toxic, but it comes back in. Suicune's behind a sub. It's setting up Calm Mind. The presence of a sub should have been a warning, but here's my assumption for this play. Zygarde comes in on Suicune and sets up a Coil, which is a really good setup move, and it's a move that Nick, I know, White Loaf, likes a lot because he ran like Coil. His Gmax last season when we had Gigantamax legal was Gmax Sandaconda, which also was a Coil abuser. Zygarde sets up a Coil and just gets Ice Beamed and dies instantly. And I think that the rationale from White Loaf, the only way that I can kind of get into his head and think that, okay, here's what I think happened, is he's assuming that this is a Crocoon, like, rest, sleep, talk, scald, calm mind set. But I think when you saw the sub, you should have realized, like, oh shit, I can't, like, set up in front of this thing, because it's not, it's not Crocoon. Or at least if it's Crocoon, it's missing either its setup, its recovery, or its attacking move. So, I don't know. I think that was sort of the questionable play, and I think that it's kind of a peek into the White Loaf mentality of this game, where you're kind of throwing things at your opponent and kind of making these really aggressive predictions about like what they're going to do to you, and just kind of not hitting the mark. And it's another, example of like this the week 1 rust that we were talking about earlier, but I think it really comes to bite White Loaf in the ass in this game.
It's true, and there have been some questionable plays at some point. For instance, I know that Scalers actually used Stone Edge against the Bishop, expecting a switch because it was banded. But even though it was knocked off afterwards, when it was facing the Miltank, it still tried to go for Stone Edge. I believe the reason was because maybe he was expecting the Miltank to be thick fat, but even though it was thick fat, I'm pretty sure Secret Fire was still more powerful than Stone Edge.
Yeah, you kind of, it's easy to forget about things like Stab when you're considering for coverage. Like, Stab really does make an insane difference. Same type attack bonus, of course, being that if you use a move that is the same type as your Pokemon, you receive a 1.5 times multiplier on its damage. And that can make up for a lot of, like, ability interaction or resist or whatever. If you're using, like, a strong Stab move versus a slightly weaker coverage move that maybe situationally would do better. I don't know, it can tend to be a lot closer than you might think. And yeah, there's like another weird interaction where like White Loaf leaves his Miltank in on the Phalanx and body slams it and just eats a close combat and dies, when he could have potentially just switched in like, I don't know, Vikavolt and or maybe even like
he literally had Blacephalon.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Had Blacephalon to take a close combat.
Yeah, so it's just so strange to see him do that. I will say the thing that I like, this is like the good player Nick like peeking out. I love the Shell Bell on the Vikavolt. I think that's a really cool choice. Because you basically you get rewarded for the pivot, right? For you can kind of get back a little bit of health passively. For Volt.
I can see the reasoning, even though technically Shell Bell is a pretty bad item that you would usually you should never use it.
9 out of 10 times you're gonna want leftovers. I like the philosophy behind the Shell Bell in this match.
I can get behind it, but in this specific match I can understand. But once again, if you're actually running on the ladder on any other use team, just don't use Shell Bell unless you're actually using something like a Fierce set with a level 1 Rattata. Shell Bell is not an item you usually want to use.
Yeah. It's more of an observation of I thought it was cool versus a
No, no,
recommend.
I can
But I
understand.
mean I understand what you're saying. Like this is an analysis. I wouldn't recommend running Shell Bell on your shit, but it's one of those heat things that like yeah you can kind of see it's you know it kind of works. Of course, Wildlife does lose, so whatever.
Yeah, I
Into the
mean,
end game too. There's like another thing where Whitelife talked about this after the match, but he switches in. There's like a weird interaction with his Escavalier and the enemy Entei between like Blacephalon and the Celesteela, where he's kind of trying to predict for a Celesteela Earthquake, and he ends up just giving Skittles his Escavalier just on the Entei switch.
yeah, it's true.
And that kind of just leaves him in a position where he needs to hit a crit on Suicune and then hope that he can still kill Celesteela at +2, which
Yeah, and even if he was trying to predict the earthquake, it's actually not a good move because then behind Celesteela can still use flamethrower, so it's pointless.
It still outspeeds a Cavalier, yeah. So you still just die to a flamethrower if it's running like Earthquake, like you're trying to predict for. Whereas like if Blacephalon just stayed in and started clicking Shadow Ball, he would have still won into that end game. But it's unfortunate. Like it's another like hindsight 2020 situation when you feel the heat of like the oh my god, this is week 1 and I really want to start off on a strong foot. You can just get in your head, and I totally understand the like oh my god, like I need to make sure I don't just get earthquaked right now and lose my only like win con, and then switch into your Escavalier and then lose your win con because you did that, down the road.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to mention that at some point, Skillers use defog to actually get rid of the sticky webs, and I'm pretty sure that might have actually won him the game because if he actually let the sticky webs on the field, his Suicune would have been slower than the Vikavolt, and Vikavolt could have actually killed the Suicune and then probably killed the Celesteela. So
yeah, so
I think that it's worth mentioning at the very least.
Yeah, I like that. It's hard to like tell without knowing the exact like speed EV distribution of each of the Pokemon, but yeah, you're not going to really generally be seeing Suicune running speed. You might see Celesteela running speed if it's like an autotomized like sweeper, but
True.
Suicune especially is not going to be running speed under basically any circumstances, and it would have suffered a lot under the. I mean, you even look at it like even if it doesn't kill, right? Like you can still get Blacephalon in, and suddenly Suicune's at like 5 or 10 or whatever, and you can just Shadow Ball it and kill it. So, solid. I mean, yeah, Skittles. We're doing a lot of talking about why I love Skittles. Held it together. It's hard. It's kind of a joke. It's kind of a meme to just say like, don't choke. Like just play good. Skittles managed to not choke. He managed to like find himself in an end game where he had an advantage, and he did not just throw it away on like an impulse move, which is it's an acquired skill, man. Even the best do it.
I don't think we have too much else to actually talk about. Maybe at the beginning, Nick kinda threw his Bishop against the Cofagrigus just to get it burned, so maybe a pointless sacrifice.
Yeah, I mean, it had like an amount of paying off. It could have done like okay, like just dropping a Sucker Punch anywhere is always nice to be able to do, like a strong Bisharp Sucker Punch. But getting rid of Cofagrigus is also I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. Getting burnt definitely sucked for.
Yeah,
Bisharp,
I think a better counter to Cofagrigus than Bishop would have been Blacephalon. Just a big Shadow Ball that Cofagrigus can't tank as... I think he has better defense than special defense. Let me check that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 145 on defense and 105 on special defense. So yeah, definitely
so almost certainly would have died to a Shadow Ball.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all know that Skittles lost in my heart because he did not nickname his Pokemon.
I mean, in that case, I basically lost all my matches last season, and probably these two matches I already played.
Yeah, well, did you win last season, IDM?
I didn't.
Yeah, it's because you didn't nickname your Pokemon. That's your problem.
Dang it, I should have known. Oh my god.
All right. Well, that's enough of that one. Definitely like a bit of a rough week 1 for Whitelife to come back and get upset. Nobody likes to be the one on the receiving end of that. Shout out to Skittles though. I mean, if this is like Skittles' breakout season, that's hype. That's really exciting. You know, I can only
I
hope that he
mean,
takes that early momentum and pushes it as hard as he can.
then again, if I was Nick, I could literally hope that do well, Skillers, do well, so that I can actually feel better about myself for
That's
losing
true.
against him.
That's like a Love and Sky situation where last season we had Love and Sky, the coach of the Chicago Snubbles. He was a brand new player, was not familiar with draft format, competitive Pokemon. He didn't even know type matchups, and he took it all the way to second place in an insanely stacked season. Just because he was a total grinder. I mean, he really put in the work. He was on that hours of like research and team building every week. But beyond that, he just he showed up and did great. And I remember White Loaf was very demoralized. He was like, "Man, I just lost to like a new player like week 1 or week 2 or whatever," because he had to fight him very early last season. And then he saw Love and Sky go on to just make the deepest run ever and land all the way into grand finals. And it was like, yeah, you can't feel too bad about losing to him week 1 or week 2 if he makes that deep a run.
Then again, nobody expected G-Max Pikachu to be that good.
G-Max Pikachu was so good. Why was it so good? I don't even think it's a good Pokemon. I don't know. That was a fun season. I can't wait. You know, one of the things on the table for Double Dip Draft, like YouTube content, is like some previous like season spotlights, and I can't wait to just talk about that goddamn G-Max Pikachu, because it was seriously insane, and I'm a fan. I'm a big fan. All right.
Not just to get back on G-Max Pikachu once again. If I actually had to face Love and Sky a bit early in the season, I don't think I would have won because I wouldn't have prepared for it.
Yeah, that's hard. Well, you know, he lost to you and Jason, and that was it last season.
Yeah,
and obviously Aurora in grand finals, but he had a great season. Anyway, would you like to go ahead and introduce our last match?
On to last match again for Spood and IDM, coach of the
Southtown Sandslashers, baby.
Sandslashers, and Cabral 095, coach of the Aegislashers.
The Slinging Aegislashers. It's a SpongeBob reference.
Yeah, it's it's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. It's funny that we're both slashers. That was something that was not pointed out to me until recently. And
that's what I actually realized when I was talking to Cabral when we actually were preparing the team. It's literally a slasher matchup. So
yeah, where it's the slasher ditto. I'm excited about. So you know, I'm gonna try and keep my contributions from an opinion standpoint to a minimum. I'm gonna try and be like very objective because obviously this is my match. I played in it. I'm a lot more like personally involved with the team building philosophy and all that, so I'll try and just say things that are like objectively true. I'll leave all the opinion crafting to IDM. IDM, feel free to slander my horrible plays in my disgusting teams, and my horrible awful sets. It won't hurt my feelings none. I'll just take it.
Then again, I can't really blame you too much because in a way, the team that you were facing was partially mine because I can help Cabral to build this team.
Yep.
Along with Aurora and Scoots, we actually also gave him some advice.
Yeah, he had the fucking Axis powers descend on my beautiful country, and just like, it's like, okay, I'll just get the top 3 seeds to. Oh my god, I'm already doing it. Sorry, I'm stepping back. You get to talk.
So, one thing that was really unexpected, especially when I was building with Cabral, was the big Regice. Regice. I'm pretty sure no one actually remembers it, but Regice actually has the best special defense. It's only behind Chuckle. 200 in special defense is just huge.
Insane, yeah.
I don't know if you realize, but you know Regieleki has 200 in speed because all the Regis besides Registeel have 200 in one of the stats. Mm-hmm. Regieleki without any investment actually gets up to something like. To 400? Yeah, 436 without any investment. That's exactly the same for Regice because since it had 200 in special defense, it's also to 436 in special defense without any investment. Mm-hmm. I mean, it kind of held back by only having 80 in HP, but it's still better than Chuckle and those very, very low HP.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Which are 20.
It's a functional HP stat, which is more than can be said for a lot of the like super insane like you'll find a lot of lower tier Pokemon kind of have this problem where they'll either have like a ton of HP, like another Pokemon I drafted, which is Drifblim, has something like 170 HP or like some crazy high number, but it's not bulky at all because it has like 35 in both of its defenses. You need to have good HP and a good defense stat to be able to actually have bulk. You can't just have one and not the other.
And I think we also forget that Regice is very tanky just due to the fact that it's an ice type. And ice types are very, very well known for being very fragile because ice type only resists ice types and it gets like 4 weaknesses.
Yeah.
So we always think that ice types kill. Yeah, it's an ice type. I can kill it. No, no, no. You actually have to think about the stats, the defensive stats, and in a way, it was my mistake because I didn't really advise Cabral about defensive Regice. We actually didn't even think that you would bring it. So
yeah, it was a good choice. I was running drills on this one, and I was thinking to myself, like, firstly, again, not to talk too much about my own draft from like a personal opinion perspective, but an issue that was very present in my team building, and I'm sure will continue to present an issue through the rest of the season, is that I'm very physically defensive, but I am not very specially defensive. And something that I wanted to draft to kind of shore up that weakness was Regice. And it does a good job. The problem is that I'm also rocking a massive fire weakness across my 3 big tanky Pokemon, Melmetal, Tangrowth, and Regice. They're all weak to fire.
it's true.
But that actually kind of came in handy. I mean, not necessarily that it came in handy, but it didn't present as much of an issue in this match because of Cabral's draft.
Yeah,
You'd like to explain why.
I mean, Cabral is literally running a rain team, so having a fire weakness actually is not that big of a deal against this specific team, even though Cabral I think he had 2 fire type Pokemon in Rodham Heat and Turtonator. And then again, I would say that Regice's big weakness is the fact that it can't really recover health beside rest.
Mhm.
I want to mention another bulky ice type a bit similar to Regice, that is Avalugg. And Avalugg actually is somewhat of the same like Regice. Instead of being good in special attack and special defense, it's actually good in physical attack and physical defense.
Mhm.
And it also has the advantage of actually having recover. So it's actually a pretty bulky ice type. And if I want to mention some niche tiers in Pokemon Showdowns, in inverted types, Avalugg is probably the top tier, just because he actually basically has almost no weaknesses.
Yeah. That's really cool. Actually, I love that.
Just so to actually come back into the match, because Avalugg is not a participant in this match anyways.
Sure.
Uh,
Very much on the theoretical side of the.
yeah, the thing is, once again, you had your special defensive core with Regice, but you also had 3 defensive Pokemon in Melmetal, Tangrowth, and Incineroar.
Mhm.
Incineroar not necessarily being too bulky, but just the fact that you have Intimidate just makes it so easy to actually tank the physical moves. And once again, you also have you had the assault vest on this match, so you could even tank some
Special moves. That's
some
right.
some special moves, especially from Rodham Heat and the overheat under the rain that basically dealt no damage to Incineroar.
I think it did less than 10. I mean, it was like really, really bad.
And the thing is, once again, when I was planning the things with Cabral, we actually didn't think he would bring Incineroar because, yeah, he has a rain team. Why would he bring
Right.
Incineroar, one of the weakest thing to bring on the rain team? And we thought, even if he brings it, just
hit it with
do a water move.
Yeah,
It will
just
just
hit
die.
it. It's the team building philosophy was a lot of like, okay, I lose to this one, because when you look at it, it's like the fire weakness is very present, and even though it's a bit mitigated by him running rain, the Rotom Heat was especially difficult to actually just kill. The way that it kind of pivoted out, a lot of my mons are a bit slower, a little bulkier, and my sweepers aren't going to be doing that much damage back to it. So I was kind of worried like, what am I going to be doing to this Rotom Heat that can actually kill it? Like, even Alolan Raichu Surf did, I think, less than half. Or, I mean, maybe doing half was like a roll. So it was hard. And especially because I don't have Stealth Rocks on my draft, which is another bad thing on the draft. I don't have any Stealth Rocks, so I can't even disincentivize it. You know, not only does
Yeah,
it not have
and
to run heavy-duty boots, but there's not even a universe where I can knock it off and it can't
yeah, and
switch in.
the other problem is that also in your draft you actually don't really have any hazard control beside Morpeko and Rapid Spin.
Yeah.
Because yes, Morpeko gets Rapid Spin for some reason.
Yeah, Morpeko gets Rapid Spin. I hope to show it off soon. I have some big plans for Morpeko this week that I'm looking forward to maybe doing. But we'll see.
Something we worth mentioning is Superpower on Tornadus. That's actually an actually good move that I wasn't the one to suggest that to Cabral, so I'm guessing that Scoots and Aurora were the ones who suggested, and they were right in a sense because just Regice, Melmetal, and Incineroar actually are weak to it, so wasn't a bad idea. Just a little bit underutilized because I'm pretty sure he only used it once, and
Yeah.
I think he should have really have baited your Regice on the Tornadus, thinking baiting a Hurricane or something, and when you would actually have expected it the least, go for the superpower to kill the Regice because I'm pretty sure the Regice wouldn't have lived a superpower.
Yeah. The tricky thing is, like, Regice isn't the most, like, physically defensive Pokemon, and dropping a superpower when it's at, like, less than 50 is absolutely going to kill it. And knocking out the Regice, I mean, especially there were several points in this game where it was very reliant on being able to come in and soak a hit and take anywhere from like 15 to like 20 damage from like a Hurricane or a Scald in the Rain or something. And it was really important that Regice like lived long enough and was healthy enough to constantly be switching in on the special type threats. Because, like, you know, I had Tangrowth, you know, it was designed to be able to, like, come in on physical Seismitoad, but as soon as it was special, I realized, like, oh my god, this Regice needs to be able to sit on Pelipper, it needs to be able to sit on Seismitoad, and it needs to be able to sit on Tornadus. And the Tornadus could have been the thing that really, like, caused it problems, like, could have been the huge linchpin.
So, as you mentioned, the Seismitoad was actually special, and I want to kinda analyze a little bit the Seismitoad. The Seismitoad was initially meant to be physical when we were talking about it with Cabral, and the reason we actually ran it special is once again we realized that you didn't really have many special defensive Pokemon, and once again we completely forgot about Regice.
Yeah.
And the thing is, just running special moves when you had Melmetal and Tangrowth was actually more beneficial to Seismitoad than just running physical moves.
Yeah, and it definitely makes sense. It's hard, you know, even just from the perspective of, like, even if you are accounting for Regice as being a threat, like, if you're hitting it, you know, it can't stay alive forever, and it's, you know, its only recovery is rest, which in electric terrain you can't fall asleep, so it was a bit risky for me to bring, like, especially with a terrain extender, rest on Regice and kind of have that be my only recovery, but it did end up paying off. I did get off a rest into a Sleep Talk Seismic Toss, I believe, and that was something that actually killed the Seismitoad.
Yeah. Another thing we actually considered with Cabral was running Sludge Wave for the Tangrowth, because after we realized that Seismitoad for some reason can't learn Ice Beam.
Oh, it can't? I thought it could.
No, it can't.
Oh, well.
It can learn Icy Wind, it can learn Ice Punch, but it can't learn Ice Beam.
That's weird. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's a big setback for it.
Yeah.
It's a really big setback, especially since of its weakness to grass types. And speaking of the weakness to grass types, we actually decided to give Seismitoad a Rindo Berry.
Yeah.
Not for Tangrowth, but for Alolan Raichu, because it's kind of know that Alolan Raichu likes having grass nut to actually kill those ground types, and grass nuts basically killed every time the Seismitoad, no matter what. Even I mean, I guess if it was really invested in HP and special defense, and Raichu had no special attack, it could survive.
But, I actually ran some calcs. This was something specifically an interaction that I calced for, and you know, even with special attack investment, I don't think I was timid. I'm pretty sure I was modest, right?
Yeah, you were modest. You were modest because you were running a Pinkerton just to.
Yeah.
Since you were basically guaranteed to be faster than everything on the field,
You might as well
besides
invest in the extra. Yeah.
Barraskewda on the rain, it's actually the right move to actually go for a modest
Right.
nature. But
But
in that case, when we had the calc, we realized, yeah, with Windowberry, you actually survived the grass knot, even at my special attack. So you survive the grass knot thanks to Windowberry, then you kill behind with Earth Power or Earthquake.
yeah. So here's the thing about that. When I was doing my calcs, I don't know how you did your calcs necessarily, but when I was doing my drills and my calcs, I found that my modest 252 plus attack or special attack, Raichu, it was a roll for the one hit KO. It was something like a 30% chance to OHKO, and it would do anything from like 89 to like 103 or something. So I remember looking at that and thinking like, what the hell am I going to do? And I realized that my counterplay to that was if it comes in on spikes, it's not a roll. I mean, it just always dies to a grass knot.
Yeah.
And that was my mentality, was I did have the grass knot in the back, and I felt like it was important to keep the spikes up on his side of the field. I didn't end up utilizing... I mean, I utilized them a bit, but he was able to clear them off. Actually, I don't even know if I ever got the spikes set up, but that was kind of the idea for me. I didn't even think about Windowberry for a second.
Yeah.
And it would have absolutely countered, like hard countered my Raichu.
You actually did go to get the spikes off, but Pelipper defogged them.
Okay, yeah, I thought I had spikes.
Oh, no. No. Rodham defogged the spikes.
Okay, yeah. I thought I had them.
And I think you actually didn't even... I mean, you brought Raichu, obviously, but I'm pretty sure it didn't even come out at any point during the match.
Not once. It did not. It didn't really get to. It was more consistent to just like Sucker Punch with Pincurchin at that point, and it does better to kind of protect my differential. Like I could have done some sneaky stuff after the Poltergeist miss on the Delmise. It could have been better for my differential. Like I could have maybe preserved like the 5-0 instead of the 4-0 by like hard switching into like Raichu and hoping to take a hit and then counter sweeping from there. I don't know. It seemed more consistent to use the Pincurchin. Also, it would have been nice to just throw out the Melmetal, but the crit overheat just completely decimated it, even in the rain. So it lived, which was good for my differential, but it meant I couldn't bring it out to preserve my other Pokemon. So in a sense, it did actually buff his score a little bit, that one crit, but in the grand scheme of things, I mean, that's a micro interaction. There is the infamous, and I'm not ever going to go a video without talking about how Firebolt lost playoffs to a Flurkin miss in Season 2.
Yeah.
Because that's the game we play.
I mean, literally, in this video, we literally talked about the fact that Spoopman lost due to Rock Slide miss. So.
Yeah. And even Firebolt, I don't know if you saw the Division 1 matches, but Firebolt lost his game to a head smash miss again.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. It's true.
So it's a curse, man. It happens.
Coming back to this match, I want to actually praise the unsung hero of this team, Terry the Tangrowth.
Terry the Tangrowth, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure in your team, it's true that there was the Rage Ice that basically tanked all the special hits, but just the sheer presence of Tangrowth actually prevented Cabral to really be being enabled in any of his Pokemon. It's true that it got a KO, it only had to use 4 knocks off, but just because you could literally bring Tangrowth onto the Barraskewda with the Rocky Helmet, and every time Barraskewda was like, yeah, okay, I just hit something, and then no, because the Rocky Helmet actually drops the HP, the Life Orb also drops the HP, and then Barraskewda has to get away, and Tangrowth can also get away, and essentially Tangrowth literally had 0 damage, virtually 0 damage because of the Regenerator.
Yeah.
So
it was a very important part of the core.
Big counter to Cabal's team.
Yeah, because that was kind of the name of the game of this whole match. I mean, Regice was a guaranteed switch in on Pelipper. You know, Tangrowth was a guaranteed switch in on Barraskewda. Even to an extent, Regice was a guaranteed switch in on Seismitoad after I found out that it was special. And it was just all about, like, okay, I can whittle his Pokemon down as long as, like, I keep... So, like, when he got up Rocks, for example, like, him getting Rocks earlier would have been really good for him because it would have killed my Incineroar a lot faster, which would have opened up his Rotom a lot more. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Aside from that, it was just like a really hard game for him to get the offensive pressure he needed between like Melmetal, Tangrowth, Regice, and Incineroar.
Indeed. And it was mainly a switch between Tangrowth and Regice to tank the physical and special hits, then the Incineroar to tank the overheat from the Rotom. And as you were literally withering him down, all of his Pokemon, you actually managed to take the upper hand. And even though at one point the Poltergeist from the Delmize actually missed, might have affected the differential, but didn't really matter on the overall match.
Yeah, in the actual results of the game, essentially at that point it was a given that I could sweep with Alolan Raichu. So even in the worst case scenario, that still would have been like a 1 or a 2-0 victory if he had everything go right and crit every time, and like had all of the RNG work in his favor. He still wouldn't have been able to live a hit like a Rising Voltage or like 2.
Yeah, and in a way, you actually helped your Pincushion get 2 kills in this match. So
yeah, I mean, I was not expecting Pincurchin to get maybe any kills in this entire draft league. I was thinking maybe it would go, like get maybe one like random sucker punch, but it kind of did some work. It killed Pelipper and it killed Tornadoes.
I mean, now you have guaranteed kills with a Pincushion, and I'm pretty sure Alolan Raichu would easily get kills later on into the season. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty satisfied. I think that I held it together for this match. I'm pretty happy with my performance. I think Cabral will go on to do good work. I know it's it's one thing for me to say that, but I really do think that like looking at his draft is very scary. Like he has threats. I mean, Barraskewda can just solo drafts when he gets the right matchup, and I don't know. I think I look forward to seeing what Cabral pulls out, because I would be, I think, shocked if he didn't manage to get at least one win somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, when you actually watch the Cabal's play style, he doesn't really misplay. I know earlier I actually said that you shouldn't try to overly predict everything. You should also always play the safest way possible. But I think in this specific case, he might have played a little too safe, because you're switching between Tangrowth and Regice were somewhat a bit obvious at some point, and I'm pretty sure he could have dealt some things like double switches to actually try to regain the momentum, and that would actually have changed a little bit during the match. Maybe managed to kill the Regice at some point. I know. Okay, never mind. The only misplay, the really somewhat big misplay he actually did, was when your Size Method was facing your Regice. You Scald instead of Earth Power, and I'm pretty sure Earth Power would actually have killed. Yeah. And if it had killed, the outcome of the match would have probably been different.
Yeah, it's hard to say. There again, the structure of the team on my end was like a lot of important like parts of a whole, and if you took out 1 or 2 parts of my defensive core too early, then suddenly like Rotom snowballs or Pelipper snowballs or Tornado snowballs or Seismitoad, like if you opened me up and just got rid of like the 1 or 2 things on my team that stood in front of any of his like really offensive, like heavy hitting Pokemon, then it very easily could have looked like a total wash.
It's true. And I just want to compare to some other matches, not on other Pokemon actually being taken out early. Not really defensive core this time, but rather offensive core. We talked about the match of Aurora against Remedy early on, and the fact that she basically took the key tree very early on, that actually enabled her to really remove a big threat for a team early on. And I also want to mention my match against Phantom Knight, in which he actually killed my Regieleki pretty early on, which I was really surprised about.
Mm-hmm.
But in return, I actually killed his Tornadus pretty early on as well. Just because we were both overconfident that we could take a hit, but we weren't expecting a certain move from the opposite Pokemon. In my case, the Earthquake from the Registeel, and in his case, my Stone Edge from my Cobalion, and that's actually probably changed the match pretty early, just removing our big fast threats that could hit hard pretty early in the match.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much covers it, though.
Yeah, I
Terms
don't,
of,
unless you want to add something about your match that you thought was pretty good to mention.
not really. I mean, I think everybody kind of got their spotlight. I think that
Yeah.
the only thing I can't talk about is Alone Raichu because it didn't get to come out, but that's just another aspect of like pressuring the opponent with like a really fast, really hard hitting late game sweeper. Aside from that, I mean, yeah, there's not much else to say. I think that's the Division 2 matches for Week 1 of Season 4 of Double Dip Draft.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for joining me, IDMs. I do appreciate it.
It was nice. It was really fun.
Yeah, I appreciate I love picking your brain. I think you're a genius, frankly. I sing your praises everywhere I go.
Well, thank you.
You're very welcome. And I hope to impress you this season. I hope to maybe see you in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, you already impressed me just with the Reg Eyes, so...
Oh, shit. Okay. That's enough. That's enough of that. We can't let the people think we're too close of friends or anything.
Oh my god. Do we know about a secret relationship? Come on, Spood.
Well, I'll tell you what. We definitely look real cozy. This is definitely longer. This analysis has been longer than either of the draft analysis videos. So. Whoops. Oh well, we had a lot to talk about. Hey, thank you for watching our video. Once again, my name is Spood with the Southtown Sandslashers.
And I'm IDM4, coach of the Versus SPS.
And we thank you so much for watching our Week 1 recap. Definitely stay tuned for the replay posts and also for following week's recaps. Definitely make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you did,